Update. Am I the a-hole for snapping at my wife and calling her crazy because she wants me to take a paternity test for my nephew? Original post. My wife and I have been married for 10 years and have been together for 14. We don't have kids. I have a 13-year-old nephew who looks a lot like me. We share some similar facial features. I'm really proud of him, and we've always had a close bond. I've played a father-like role in his life since he was young, especially since his own father is absent, and my sister divorced him a long time ago. Some family members have commented on how much my nephew resembles me, and at first, I thought it was just a nice observation. But for some reason, these comments started making my wife insecure and doubtful. She was questioning why I needed to play such a prominent role in my nephew's life, why my nephew had autism, etc. Her insinuations became uncomfortable and strange. I admit that my sister's dry humor might have contributed to my wife's insecurities. During family gatherings, my sister would joke about how nice it is that her son looks like me, saying she couldn't be happier. It was clearly meant as a joke, but I asked my sister to tone it down because it's affecting my wife. Last night, things escalated when my wife asked if I would take a paternity test to put her mind at ease. That's when I snapped and called her crazy, saying that marrying her was the biggest mistake of my life. I regretted saying it immediately because it wasn't true. My wife is the love of my life. She went quiet and started crying, and I had to console her afterward. Was I the a-hole? Now for the top comments before reading the update. She thinks you had a baby with your own sister? Not your brother's wife or anything, but your own sister. No, that is crazy. My oldest niece is a miniature version of me. Looks and attitude, lol. I have never once been accused of incest with my brother. OP, your wife is on some other level of insecure. You are not the a-hole at all. She needs therapy. It's genetics, and sometimes a niece or nephew can look just like that aunt or uncle. Like it's crazy to insinuate incest because he looks like his uncle. Does she not understand they are siblings and have similar genetics? Two full-blood siblings share about 50% of their DNA. That means the odds of OP sharing significant features with his nephew are 1 in 4, which not rare. Sorry, but someone accuses me of sleeping with my sibling, I'm gonna say some kind of something to them. It won't be pretty. She doesn't get to cry and acts like she did nothing wrong. Not the a-hole. And love of your life or not, your wife thinks you slept with your sister. How do you come back from that? An accusation of ordinary cheating is bad enough for a marriage and can definitely justify some not-so-nice words. Throw incest into the mix and yeah, OP's wife is definitely in the wrong here. She needs to pull her head out of her behind and apologize. Then probably seek therapy. Now for the update. Hey everyone, just a quick update. I've agreed to take the paternity test, but there are some conditions attached. I realize my wife is being paranoid and irrational, but I'm willing to take the test to help ease her fears. Sometimes, fears don't follow any logic. I've had my own irrational worries before. I talked to my sister today, and she was understandably upset with my wife. But after discussing it at length, my sister agreed to the test, provided we set some conditions. Later, I spoke to my wife and told her I was willing to take the test, but there were a few terms. My wife was relieved that I agreed and explained the conditions to her. The first was that she needed to stop making any insinuations or accusations immediately. She agreed right away. The second condition was that there would be no more arguments about me spending time with my sister and nephew. Over the years, we've had disagreements about why I spend so much time at their house. My wife agreed to this condition, though she took a little time to consider it. The third and final condition was that I would be free to go on vacations with my sister and nephew without my wife coming along. I told her up front that my sister doesn't want her to join us on these trips anymore. My wife hesitated a bit on this one, but she eventually agreed. That's probably my final update. Thanks everyone for the advice. This will clearly resolve everything. I give her 1 month before she claims you lied about the results or it's a false negative. The thing is, the test is going to show they're genetically linked because he is the kid's uncle, and that alone might be enough for her to be convinced he is the father, even when the percentages don't line up. This isn't a mentally stable person he's dealing with. Therapy should have been one of his conditions. I had the same thought. They're biological siblings. The test will come back that he and his nephew are related, and I can imagine OP's wife twisting it to say she was right. Lol, dude, it's not gonna matter what the test says. Your wife has an irrational delusion in her head and will go through whatever mental gymnastics she needs to justify it. The test is not going to help. If anything, it's going to get worse, especially based on the conditions you set. I told my sister this, but if this doesn't work, I'm going to look into divorce. Next story. Am I the a-hole for taking my kids back home with me from my parents' house after they violated the one simple rule I gave them? In March 2022, my parents reached out to me because they wanted to meet my daughters, Angela and Julianne, both 9, IVF twins. I agreed on the condition that they would not introduce my kids to my aunt's family. Growing up with my aunt's family was a nightmare. They were incredibly abusive and neglectful when I lived with them. To give you an idea, back in 1997, my aunt took my brother's asthma inhaler and refused to give it back because he wouldn't share his cookies with her daughter. This was a woman in her mid to late 20s doing this to a 7-year-old. I had my lawyer draft a contract outlining my terms. It wasn't legally binding, just symbolic. But it clearly stated that I would fly with my daughters from Seattle to Albuquerque for spring and summer breaks, provided that my aunt's family wouldn't be introduced to them or come near the property under any circumstances. I reserved the right to never bring my kids back if the rule was violated. My mom signed it and I planned a trip. Before leaving, I explained to my daughters who these people were and why I didn't like them. I told them to let me know if they met them. I treat my kids like they can understand things, and I always try to explain situations to them honestly. We made a flight down and arrived at my parents' home. But 2 hours later, the doorbell rang. Guess who it was? My aunt's family, standing around and laughing as if we've always gotten along. I turned to my mom and asked, "Why did you invite them?" "Mom, well, they're family." "Me, they're your family." Angela and Julianne were going home. Since the girls hadn't unpacked yet, they grabbed their things and I collected my belongings to leave. My mom broke down, begging me not to go, saying things like, "Really? You actually meant it?" And "I can't believe you." Meanwhile, my aunt's family started making judgmental comments, calling me ungrateful and trying to guilt-trip me. If you've ever dealt with abusive people, you know they always resort to the same victim-blaming tactics. After that, I blocked my parents' and aunt's family on all platforms and instructed my kids to do the same. They've complied, but not before asking me for the latest new jeans merch, of course. 2 weeks ago, my brother came over and tried to reason with me. He spoke calmly, asking me to reconsider. I told him I gave them one rule, and they violated it within 2 hours of us being there. It's not just about the rule. It shows they don't respect me. They cared more about my aunt's family than they did about respecting my boundaries, which makes me question how much they really care about my kids if they were willing to break the agreement so quickly. It seems my mom has either forgiven or doesn't care enough about what we endured with those people to respect my boundaries. She seems to think I was bluffing, even though I made my rules clear. Your brother was the one she took the inhaler from, and he's going to bat for them? Jesus, he's in it deep too, huh? Not the a-hole. My brother is actually a very forgiving and loving person. He likes to see the good people and believes that people can change. I agree with him to an extent. Really, the only reason those people aren't messing with him is because he's older and has been overseas with the US military. Your brother is trauma bonded with your family. He is allowing himself to be used to manipulate you and he refuses to see it. He is not forgiving and loving. He is a doormat. I really hate to consider that possibility. I reserve the right to never bring kids back here if you violate this one rule. She signed it and I planned a trip. Really? You actually meant it? That is the weakest reaction ever. Who goes through the trouble of having someone sign an agreement just for the fun of it? Why did she think you went to all that effort? At least she showed her true colors so early in the visit. If she had waited until the end, it could have caused real confusion for your children. They would have had, hopefully, good memories with Grandma, and then struggled to understand why Grandma did something wrong at the end. Instead, she broke the rule almost as soon as you arrived. And your kids could see that you take rule breaking seriously. It's also a good thing that your aunt stayed true to her usual self, showing that she hasn't really changed, despite what your brother hoped. True change would have started with a sincere apology and a willingness to accept any terms given by the offended party. They just don't take me seriously. They think I'm still a kid in middle school who has childish complaints or something. Next story. Am I the a-hole for cutting off my parents after they pressured me to give up my autistic son for adoption? I, 32 female, am a single mom to my 7-year-old son who is on the autism spectrum. He is everything to me. I've been raising him mostly on my own since my divorce 3 years ago. My ex and I tried to make it work, but the stress of raising a special needs child took a toll, and he walked away. Now it's just me and my son. While it's not always easy, I wouldn't trade him for anything. But my parents don't see it the same way. Ever since my son's diagnosis, they've made comments implying that he is too much for me to handle. At first, it was more subtle, like you need a break or he must be exhausting. But recently, it's gotten worse. They've even suggested I should consider putting him up for adoption because they believe he is too much of a burden. The first time they said that, I was in shock and didn't know how to respond. I love my son with all my heart, and the idea that they see him as a problem that could be fixed through adoption made me sick. I tried to explain how hurtful their words were, but they wouldn't stop bringing it up. Every time we talked, they hinted that I was making things harder for myself by keeping him. They've said things like, "You're still young, you could have another chance at a normal life," as if my son isn't already my entire world. Things came to a head a couple of weeks ago when they actually sat me down and said they'd done research on homes for special needs kids, suggesting he could get better somewhere else. They've even said it would be better for everyone if I gave him up. I was absolutely furious. I told them they were cruel and heartless, and if they couldn't accept my son as part of our family, then they weren't part of our lives anymore. Since then, I've cut off all contact. My phone's been blowing up with messages from my parents and even other family members telling me I'm overreacting and that they were just trying to help. They're saying I'm being ungrateful and that I should think about how hard it is for them to see me struggling. Some relatives are even suggesting I should forgive them because they're my parents and only want what's best for me. But I can't get past what they said. My son isn't a burden, and he certainly isn't someone to give up just because life with him is more challenging. He's my child, my entire world. Now, I'm questioning myself. Am I being too harsh? Should I give them another chance because they're family? Or am I justified in cutting them off after what they said? Am I the a-hole? You are not the a-hole. Your parents' suggestion to give up your son is unacceptable. Your child's well-being is your priority and your right to defend him. Appreciate your support. I will always stand behind him. Always. As I stated in my first reply, I raised an ASD son and my daughter has 3 sons who are on various levels of the spectrum. I wouldn't trade any one of them for so-called normal boys. If your parents will not accept and love your son, you have no choice but to go no contact. Another Reddit case of time to cut off all these people and move somewhere else. Last story. Am I the a-hole for telling my brother's fiancée to grow up and stop trying to put her anger and trauma on me? My brother Matt, 30 male, is engaged to Evelyn, 32 female. Matt is our parents' biological son, and I'm 25 female, their adopted daughter. We also have another biological sister and 2 more adopted brothers. Our parents fostered many kids and adopted some of us. I've always known I was adopted, as I was removed from an unsafe environment and didn't have any safe biological relatives. My biological family is small in terms of known members, and none of them are good people. I'm very grateful to have been adopted. I feel lucky to have found a family that embraced the fact that we weren't biologically connected but loved us just the same, without any shame. Each of us who were adopted has our own story. One of my brothers, for example, was orphaned, and his birth parents wanted him to find a family who would love and care for him, which he found with us. Matt's fiancée, Evelyn, was adopted as an infant and has a lot of complicated feelings about it. I understand why she feels this way, especially since her adoptive parents tried to erase her biological background, shamed her for being curious about it, and spoke negatively about her birth family. I don't think that was fair or right. However, Evelyn tends to push her feelings onto other adoptees, assuming we all feel the same as she does. She has made negative comments about my parents, accusing them of robbing 3 children of their rights to their biological family history and identity. She even suggested that I was brainwashed by CPS into believing that I was removed for safety reasons and had no safe biological relatives. For the record, all my known birth relatives have been in and out of prison, and I have verified this. She told me that I'm just traumatized and too afraid to admit that I was denied my real family. I explained to her that I don't feel that way, but she insisted that all adopted kids feel the same, claiming that adoptees are treated as products in the US. I told Matt that I couldn't handle this anymore, and that I would need to see him and Evelyn less if they didn't stop. Despite this, she keeps seeking me out. On Saturday, while she was at my parents' home, she tried to bring it up again. I couldn't stand her talking about my parents that way in their own home, so I snapped. I told her to grow up and accept that people can have different experiences and perspectives, and that only children think everyone should feel the same. I also said that she needed to stop projecting her anger and trauma onto me, just because our experiences are different. Evelyn said I was being spiteful and throwing it in her face. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. What does your brother do while she sits in your parents' home and talks smack about them? Do your parents know? He doesn't say anything in front of us. Our parents know. I didn't know it, but they were aware before too. They feel bad that her experience left her feeling as she does. Your parents are so good. You are not the a-hole. She should really seek therapy. I agree. I think that's why she's so explosive about the topic. She needs to talk about it because her feelings are so complicated and make her miserable with her anger and grief. Not the a-hole. In advocacy spaces, there's a few golden rules. Things like, don't talk about us without us, as in don't represent us without letting us talk too. And a big one is, experiences may vary and I cannot talk for you because I haven't walked in your shoes, as in what you've experienced I cannot imagine, because I haven't lived your life. Evelyn is failing on both of those, probably more. Has she got an adoption fetish? Is that why she's with your brother? How does he feel about all this nonsense? Not her, but the crap she's talking. And how will he reconcile this with having children with her? I think she has become so bitter about the flaws in the adoption system and the bad outcome she got that she can't accept there are people who have benefited from it too. I don't believe adoption is part of the reason she's with him because she found out about some of us being adopted months into their relationship.